Hey guys, Chris here, and in this video I want to talk about ways that us musicians can remain productive and continue to progress during lockdown. Obviously, it's a period where we now don't have access to things like playing live shows, to maybe going to rehearsal rooms, rehearsing with bandmates, etc. It's obviously quite limiting, but there's still lots and lots that you can do in the meantime and still progress, especially keeping in mind that lockdown will eventually be over and you can come out the other side with something to show for it. So let's get straight into it. Number one is obviously practice, and I'm assuming that pretty much no matter your instrument, you're able to still practice at home. Obviously, you might require some sort of negotiation, maybe with neighbors, family members, etc., and maybe some kind of soundproofing. I've just made a video on how, as a drummer, even if you don't have access to an acoustic kit, you can still create some sort of home setup using pillows, practice pads, etc. But practice is obviously still going to be a huge one. You want to maintain your chops and be able to still play and not have so much rust built up once you get back out there and are playing maybe live shows or with a band, etc. So definitely maintain practice. It's again a great opportunity actually that we have so much time to just focus on the things that we want to progress at. So be practicing. Now the next thing is going to be, I'm going to go over a bunch of subtopics and things that you can do regarding this, but it's going to be content creation. I'll start with the fact that obviously in 2020 and recent years, social media is a huge aspect of marketing and reputation as a musician. You want to really be putting yourself out there, assuming your goal is to be a full-time musician, whether that's a touring musician, to be an educator, etc. Social media is going to be one of the most essential elements to achieving these goals. So if you aren't already a content creator, this has been a perfect opportunity for you to really learn how to do that. Obviously, a lot of people are unsure, they don't know what programs to use, or maybe you're just very camera shy. All of that is completely understandable, but it's important to note that these things require practice. I remember when I first started creating content, it felt very awkward and strange to be in front of a camera. Sometimes it can still be somewhat nerve-wracking, but it goes away with time and practice, and you'd be surprised how comfortable you can get very quickly. But again, the most important thing being that it's such a great opportunity to not only market yourself as a musician, but to network with other musicians. If you aren't doing this already, I can't preach it enough. It's so helpful, and you can build some really amazing relationships with other musicians, with people that want to support you, or fans if you will, and just building your presence in the local community and even potentially on a global scale. You never know, you might put out a video that just goes viral and really gives you a sort of push in the right direction and of what you're trying to achieve. And also it's so great because, as I think is evident during lockdown, because we're all stuck indoors but still require, especially as musicians, that sort of collaborative element. It's such a great opportunity to collaborate with other musicians. You've probably seen this yourself on whether it's Instagram, Facebook, etc., that a lot of musicians are doing this now and taking the time to maybe even just record a simple loop, send it off to the next musician, they record something, and then etc. And it's such a great way to build this sort of relationship, a sense of community, and to get other people really interested in what kind of projects and things that you're working on. Again, this is also so great because you are essentially building your own portfolio, and that's really helpful as a musician and shouldn't be undermined at all, especially for things like auditions and maybe applying for certain roles, whether it's in a band or a course, something like that down the line. It's great to have a portfolio that you can show, especially one that has collaborative elements. So it's not just you playing in your bedroom, but it shows that you have been playing with other musicians and you have video or audio footage of that. So definitely something to consider. Build your social media presence. I can't stress this enough. Obviously, social media is quite saturated, but this is where you can take the time to develop your own style, your own aesthetic, your own niche. And there are so many YouTube tutorials, Google tutorials, etc. If you just put in the time to research and simply do it, don't wait for the perfect product. Just start putting yourself out there and keep doing that consistently. You will build a presence. And again, sometimes all it takes is that one video to really give you a big push in the right direction. You can then find out how to work things like editing softwares, how to use DAWs, and just again put in the research, put in the time and the action, and it will pay off. Another thing you can be doing as a musician, if you aren't already, is to be composing, to be songwriting, to be creating, right? This is what we want to do as musicians, and just because we're in lockdown obviously doesn't mean that we can't do this. Obviously you might not have access to a recording studio, but there's cheap ways to go about recording yourself. I mean, the cheapest probably being just with your phone, or microphones that you can find within your budget online. Amazon is obviously still going. You know, I found songwriting to be such a great creative outlet, you know, especially during this sort of circumstance. A lot of us musicians tend to want to express ourselves regarding thoughts and feelings that we're having, and I think this pandemic has obviously been something that's spawned a lot of thoughts and feelings for us. So, you know, every musician has their own unique angle, and it's worth being able to try express what you are feeling. So learning how to songwrite, and you know, whether you're just using something like GarageBand, Logic Pro, FL Studio, Ableton, whatever you're using, it's an opportunity to learn how to use that DAW or digital audio workstation and to keep improving your skill. It's also something that's worthwhile knowing how to do as a sort of full-time musician or someone who wants to be hired. The more of an understanding you have about these sorts of softwares, it's only going to benefit you down the line. So definitely something to consider. And again, there's plenty of YouTube and Google tutorials that you can find regarding this. But again, I think a lot of this ties into the whole social media aspect, because we are limited, we're sort of bound to social media presence and social media interaction as opposed to real life interaction, obviously during this time. So it's really something to put a lot of energy and focus on, in my opinion, especially as a musician. It's important to note that obviously rest is going to be a huge element, and you don't want to burn yourself out. But in trying to remain productive, be interacting, putting yourself out there, utilizing social media for its benefits. I would try and stray away from just being a consumer and, again, being a creator, because through doing this, you're going to be building a portfolio, building relationships, and building a presence. And as a musician in this day and age, that is so essential. And obviously it's a saturated market, but that's just more reason to go in on it and really put yourself out there. Now, another great creative outlet that you can consider, and I've actually done this myself now, which I only wish I started this earlier, is to start a podcast. It's such a great opportunity to really, again, verbally express what you've been going through, what projects you're working on, and again, just anything that you want to market yourself with. It's also awesome for collaborative projects because you can interview people, have other people put in their sort of points of view, perspective on whatever it is that you want to talk about. And this is the beauty of it, is you can talk about essentially anything, and it's long form. People have a lot of time now, a lot of downtime, so a podcast really allows them the opportunity to be immersed in your world and listen to what you have to say in more depth than, say, one single Instagram post or story or Facebook post. If there's one thing I've really found when it comes to social media presence, is that people want to get to know you, your followers, your fans, whatever you want to call them, your supporters, in more than so this is something I've learned. Rather than just seeing the final fine-tuned, polished product, people really like to see the imperfections and the process itself. And I think the reason for that is because it's so much more relatable and it resonates. It's less superficial, and again, people get to know the real you. Now, if part of your aesthetic and your brand is that you only have the final finished products that are polished and fine-tuned again, then that's fine, but there's so much value in really opening yourself up. Now, of course, have boundaries, make sure that you're comfortable doing this sort of thing, but you'll find that the more you open up and the more that you can make yourself relatable to other people, it's really a chance for dialogue and more intimate, loyal relationships, if you will. I've definitely found this to be the case for myself, and it's not something I'm trying to express as an opportunist necessarily, but more as a form and way of building genuine relationships, which is going to help so much in the long run. Again, if you're a band or a musician, I'm assuming that you want to be playing live shows, that you want to be educating. And if you want that to be the case, then you want people who are really dedicated to your craft and your process and your journey, essentially. So podcasting has just been such a great way to go about doing that. And obviously it's getting a lot more popular now. So the earlier you can start doing this, the better. And again, I think it's also just a great form of creative and expressive outlet. And it's essentially a diary. I think one thing that I find so cool about something like a podcast is it's something you can look back on down the line. And even for me, looking back at my first episode or two, it feels like I've already kind of come a long way since. So it's really awesome to reflect on. It's a great opportunity to market yourself, talk about any projects you're working on. It's an opportunity to be collaborative, to do interviews, talk with other people, share knowledge, etc. So many benefits, and I think this is really going to be a crucial element for musicians to really immerse themselves into as the following years progress. So something to consider, podcasting. And so outside of all these things, practice, social media presence, collaborating, social media networking, podcasting, song composing or songwriting, it's also important to note that, again, that this is most likely going to end. We're going to be out of lockdown. We're going to be able to play shows again eventually, and meet other musicians and people in person. So I think it's important to, again, tie all these things into sort of what your goal is and to have some sort of a strategy for what it is you're trying to achieve. It's really great to immerse yourself in all these different projects and to just take the time to experiment, find what works for you, build your own sort of style and aesthetic, whatever that is, develop your sort of identity. But have your goal in mind and try and cater these projects obviously towards that goal. So maybe it's not going in 20 different directions. Now, that's just my advice. Obviously, if you just enjoy all these sort of projects and doing these things as a form of expressive outlet, then that's fine. But I think it's obviously super beneficial if you're serious about being a full-time musician or it already is your livelihood, to really cater these projects to what your goal and what you're trying to achieve is, which I would conclude with that, when this lockdown does end, then have some sort of strategy in place for when you get out there and what you plan to do, so that you're not completely adrift and you're not just floating. It's sort of like a bear that's come out of hibernation and it's like malnourished and it doesn't, it's all groggy and hazy. Try to come out with some sort of strategy or plan so that you have a plan of action and you're able to hit the ground running. I mean, I'm sure a lot of us are dying to hit the ground running as soon as this ends, but it just helps, I think, if you have some sort of a plan or strategy for when you are back out there in the market, so to say. So, these were just some tips that I've come up with myself and have been doing myself, which has really helped for not only my own sanity, but as a way of remaining productive and progressing as a musician. So I hope these help. And if you have any more to contribute, any other ideas or thoughts, please put them down in the comments. If you like the video, give it a like, subscribe if you want to see more. Until then, I'll see you in the next one.